I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, on this hot, steamy August afternoon, we're going to talk about invasives, fish specifically. Dudley, when I look at you, I think about invasive plants. You hate all these trees and plants that you consider invasive.
That are trying to take over.
Yeah, but we don't talk about invasive fish very often. So sitting over here on our couch, we've got direct from Mississippi State, Dr. Wes Neal.
Nice. Our favorite university, or my favorite university.
Well, yeah. And
I think you've paid more money to Mississippi State than any other university.
I did. My daughter went to Mississippi State.
That's good.
Yeah, I believe in maroon and white. Dudley went to every college in Mississippi, but his favorite one is Mississippi State.
I didn't go to Southern.
Oh, you didn't go to Southern.
No, I mean, I went down there a good bit. I didn't go to Southern.
Well, Dr. Wes Neal, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I've been in Mississippi, I guess, for about 16 or 17 years now. I came from Arkansas. I'm the state fisheries extension specialist. So basically what that means is I am the guy that when you call and say, I've got weeds in my pond, how do I kill them? Or why are my bass so small? Usually it ends up with me at one point or another, whether it comes through the county or whether it comes directly to me. I also do research on fish management, both sport fish management, some conservation work, some invasive species work, and quite a bit of work that's international. So I do a lot of work like in Cambodia and Puerto Rico, and I got hopefully some stuff starting up in Bangladesh soon if they ever settle down over there. They just got a new prime minister today, so we'll find out.
Wow,
that's cool.
I had no idea on that.
Yeah.
So. But,
I mean, yeah, some of these professors just get to travel all over the place and study stuff.
Yeah, we don't get to. We make it happen.
Yeah,
there you go.
So you get the question, I can't catch any fish in my pond. There must not be any fish in here.
All the time. And sometimes they're right. Most of the time, they're not right. Yeah. You know, a lot of times it's just they're not fishing at the right time of day, or they've not been paying attention to what's happened in their pond. They've had a fish kill and didn't know about it.
So I've always wondered, how did the word extension get into all this? What is an extension?
Well, extension is a federal program. The cooperative extension program is something that starts at the federal government, but then it's run by each individual state. So Mississippi's cooperative extension program is housed at Mississippi State University, and I don't remember right offhand. We have several thousand employees that are stationed around the state. Every county has an extension office, and they may have one or multiple extension agents that do ag and natural resources. 4-H is an extension program, home ec type programs as well. So it's really, extension is designed, it's a way of taking research-based information and putting it out there for the public to consume to live better. And, you know, our goal essentially is to give people the information to manage their properties better. A lot of the stuff that folks that work through you guys and, you know, that call you and say, hey, you know, how do I grow bigger deer? Well, we've got an extension specialist that specializes in food plots, for example. Or how do I grow bigger bass? Well, that's me. Or how do I manage my farm to have more ducks on it? Those are all things that extension can help with.
Yeah.
Why are my tomatoes yellow?
It's an unbelievable research. The old website was like MSU Cares or something like that.
It was. They just redid the whole website. It's now extension.msstate.edu.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much the same information.
Plethora of information on basically anything. Country living, I guess, is the best way to put for me, or land and resource based.
Spell plethora.
Plethora. Plethera.
ORA.
Got closer than I thought he'd
You're
get.
the author. I do the math. Remember, I do math. You write.
Oh, Lord. Well, I've always wondered. So when I watched the show Green Acres, was Hank Kimball an extension agent?
Oh, I don't even remember that show that well. It's been a long time. I was pretty small when that came out.
He must not have been. Or you
Not everybody's as old as Bobby.
I was watching the Beverly Hillbillies. I think that was the one episode before, and I didn't watch Green Acres.
Yeah. Well. All right. So let's kind of turn our attention. So we started off kind of wanting to talk about these invasive carp, and it seems like for maybe 15 or 20 years we've been seeing videos of these fish hitting people in the heads, boaters, water skiing and fish jumping, and
using a sword and catching them off water skis.
John Paul Marsh shooting them with a bow.
Yeah.
Where did these fish come from, and where are they now?
Well, first, let me start off by saying I'm not an invasive carp expert. I play one on TV, I guess, but I'm not one in real life. But I have my own podcast, something called Fish University, that I interviewed recently, the invasive carp specialist. This guy that's just retired from the USGS, a guy named Dwayne Chapman. He's considered the expert, and I learned a lot from him, so I'll try to share as much as I can.
Please do.
That's right. Please.
They used to be called Asian carp. We changed the name because it was politically incorrect. They're invasive carp. They're carp. They come from the Asian continent, most of them from the China area, although some of them are found elsewhere as well. And they're species that some of them you may be familiar with. Grass carp that we stock in our ponds is one of the Asian carp. And then there's two that we call the big-headed carps. That's the silver carp and the bighead carp. They're in the same genus. And there's a new one that's just recently come on the scene that's gotten out called the black carp. And these are all carp that are from another continent. They're brought into the United States for a purpose. The purpose might have been, for some of the species, it was to control vegetation like the grass carp. For other species like the bighead and the silver, it was to help with some of the problematic algal blooms, cyanobacterial blooms, for example, that happen in ponds. And then the black carp's actually a snail eater or a mollusk eater. It eats snails and mussels. So it was brought in to help control snails in ponds that can harbor parasites. And some of the parasites have really weird life cycles where they live part of their life in a snail and part of their life in a bird and part of their life in a fish. Well, if you take away the snails, you don't have parasites. So they were brought in for that purpose. Everything that's brought into aquaculture has a risk of getting out at some point in time, and all four of these have, one way or another, gotten out into the wild.
Imagine that. You bring something from somewhere else and let it go, and it takes over. Mm-hmm. You would have thought we would have learned by now.
So where did these things escape? Was it somewhere in the south or somewhere in the north? Or
there's a lot of questions that are still there on that. Each species came from different places. The grass carp, we've been introducing those intentionally for over 100 years. Those are, at first, before we knew better, we were stocking just normal reproductive grass carp into our ponds and other water bodies to control vegetation. They're really good at it. When they're young, they eat about 100% of their body weight a day in vegetation, the softer vegetations. They're not going to eat, woody stems and things like that. So certain species are more preferred than others. But after a while, we realized, hey, these things can't spawn in ponds, but if they get out, and they do get out, they get down into our bigger rivers, they can reproduce. And we've got established populations of grass carp all over the United States now and elsewhere. The silver carp.
Before we leave that carp,
sure.
Why does that carp, when it gets a certain age, stop eating? Why is he's turned into a liability rather than an asset?
It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I just know that when they're younger, they eat about 100% of their body weight a day. As they get larger, that percentage drops. So I guess as they're reaching a larger size, they're becoming more mature, and they're not growing as fast anymore. They don't need as much energy. So then you just have a fish swimming around that's 40, 50, or 60 pounds in the pond that might be eating 5 or 10 pounds of vegetation, and it's just taking up a lot of biomass and not really doing its job.
I tell you what, Lanny, have you ever been in a pond, or Wes, have you ever been in a pond and just, breaking day, mist rising up, and you cast a topwater bait and it hit and the water just blows out of the little area, and you're like,
crazy.
oh my gosh, what was that? And one of those big carp.
Oh yeah. We were up in one of the state lakes electrofishing not long ago and shocked up a grass carp that was probably 60 or 65 pounds. I mean,
Wow.
they're huge.
I mean, it's almost like manatee or something.
It
when you
is.
see that.
There's one in a big reservoir, irrigation reservoir in Chickasaw County that we have access to, and we regularly see him out there. And my kids swim with him. They literally swim
like-
up to
they're
him,
buddies.
and they hang out. They're hanging out with the carp.
Yeah.
And they come home.
No reason to take them to see the whale sharks.
Yeah,
they got the
just
carp.
swim with the carp.
Well, while I was talking, we were mentioning my buddy Barry Smith a few minutes ago, and he figured out he built a fly out of like a pencil eraser, and some grass
To catch 'em?
And yeah, he's
It's
catching
big
'em.
in Europe to catch them in it. I mean, don't they carp fish over there?
I
Yeah,
don't
those are
understand.
common carp they're chasing after over
Ah,
there.
okay,
Yeah, and those are a
different
lot
kind.
easier to catch. But the grass carp, I've not personally verified this, but I've heard strawberries and grapes work well. I don't know if that's true, but it's something I'd like to try someday when I get a chance.
They're a big. They will
And if you
tear
don't
up a
catch
lot.
any, you got some good snacks. Hey.
So the ones that today are stocked, they're sterile, right?
Yes, we call them triploids. And all that really means is, how most animals have 2 sets of chromosomes. You and I have 2 sets of each chromosome. We use a process to cause them to have 3. And because they have 3, they can't go through the process of cell division for reproductive products, and they can't reproduce. So every grass carp that we recommend in the state of Mississippi and a number of other states as well have the same recommendation. It should be triploid, which is basically means they've done the process to this fish, they've let it grow up, they've verified that it is in fact a triploid fish, and if it does escape the water wherever you're stocking it, if it gets into a bigger system where they normally could spawn, it shouldn't be able to spawn.
So that's the catch. They have to be in a bigger river system to spawn.
Most of the invasive carps need flowing water and larger systems typically with enough duration of flow for the eggs to stay suspended as they move downstream before they hatch.
Okay, that makes sense. I've always wondered that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why, when you hear about the silver carp, which we started off talking about, it's usually in the bigger rivers. It's usually in the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, Missouri River, Illinois River, because those are where they thrive. I mean, they'll come up these other smaller rivers, but they're not going to thrive in them because they need this long flowing
Consistent
stretch
flow
of water. Yeah.
So are they destroying the native fisheries? Are they making it harder to bass fish or in these rivers where they're so? And it looks like it's dangerous to ride a boat through some of these areas from time. What all? There's obviously negatives here, but is it going to get better?
Big topic. Yeah, we could go. Each species has its own pros and cons, so we can get into each one of them if you'd like to. With the silver carp, which are the ones everybody's familiar with because the flying fish, the flying carp, yes, they're extremely dangerous. They jump at any disturbance, whether it's geese taking off, flying off the water, throwing a rock, and of course boats. Boats going up a river will cause them to jump. They spook real quick. They have a tendency to jump behind the boat. So if you're a water skier, that's particularly dangerous. Or if you're moving slowly, they'll come in the boat. And there's all kinds of different reasons why it's dangerous. Obviously, if you get hit by a 50-pound fish when you're going 40 miles an hour, it could be extremely catastrophic to you. The other thing is, when they come in the boat, they're going to break stuff. If you're a bass fisherman and your 22-foot Triton boat flying up the river and you've got your rods on your console sticking straight up in the air and a carp comes up over the bow that weighs 50 pounds, you're going to break all your rods. But the bigger concern is they'll come down on the throttle mechanism.
Oh.
And if they hit it from the side, they can break it off. And then suddenly, if you're going 40 miles an hour, you can't stop.
Yeah, you got to bail out.
And if they hit it from behind, which they do a lot, they can take you from a slow speed to a fast speed really quick. If you're in a confined area, you could find yourself up the bank before you know it.
Up a creek
Yes.
without a paddle.
Wow.
Without a boat.
And that's the silver carp.
Those are the jumping carp or the silver carp. Very closely related to them are the big-headed carp or the bighead carp.
Do they have a really big head?
A little bit bigger than the silver carp. Both of them are just really crazy-looking fish. Their eyes seems to be below their mouth
Yeah.
on the side.
Yeah, I
it
was
just
just
looks
looking at 'em.
looks
They look-
alien and what.
Yeah.
And
Ricky
both of
Flint. Did y'all see the pictures Ricky Flint posted the other day where they killed some with it's like 101 degrees and they're out walking around in a swamp with bow and arrows killing these carp. It looked like they're as long as your leg.
I didn't see those.
Incredible. They were big-headed carp.
Wow. Well, with the big-headeds and the silvers, they're both planktivores. They feed on zooplankton. And you might think, well, that doesn't hurt my bass. My bass they're eating fish, and they're not hurting my brim or my crappie. They're eating small fish. Well, all those adult fish are piscivores, but when they're little, they eat zooplankton. And crappie in particular love to be, when they hatch near the shore on the nest. As soon as they swim up, they move offshore, and they spend the first part of their life just out in the open water feeding on plankton. And these invasive carps can reduce plankton concentrations 90 to 95%.
Wow.
So you can imagine, and the same is true for almost all juvenile fish, whether it's largemouth bass. Largemouth bass are planktivores until they get about 2 inches long. So if you need the plankton and suddenly there's a 50-pound fish out there swimming around eating all of it, that's going to hurt our sport fish. So, crappie, largemouth bass, all of them were likely going to see some impacts when the plankton populations crash from the silver and big-headed carp.
Not cool.
So can you kind of paint a picture of where these carp are now?
Yeah, they are. Oh, goodness. The majority of them are in the Mississippi Basin. So essentially from New Orleans north all the way up the river, up the Missouri River, the Illinois River, the Ohio River, into the Tennessee River, the Kentucky Lake. I don't know if you guys have seen the video online of the Kentucky Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks electrofishing below Barkley Dam. If you haven't seen it, go Google it. I mean, they pull this boat into the corner of a dam and they turn the power on, and it just, the entire water becomes fish. It's amazing. They've shown up in other places as well. The big fear is that they get into the Great Lakes. They're trying to keep them out of the Great Lakes. There's been a few, they've already gotten into Lake Erie to some degree, but they're spending millions and millions of dollars to try to keep them out of the Great Lakes.
Were they using electricity?
Electricity, bubble nets, flashing strobe lights, carbon dioxide, a lot of different things trying to keep them away. Sound.
Oh my goodness, I'm looking at this video. Look at that.
Wow. And what do people Google to get to that?
I would just put Kentucky Department of Wildlife or Barkley Dam carp electrofishing or something. It should pop right up.
Yeah, I've searched Kentucky Department of Wildlife and carp.
I've seen some crazy videos, but that takes a
pretty
cake.
wild.
Well, it just tells you how dense that these fish can
I
get
mean, they are
in their areas.
thick.
They're filling the boat. There's fish laying all over the water, and they're all, 20, 30, 40
Oh, they're
pounds?
big. Yeah.
So when I look at a map of the basin that the Mississippi River drains, it's a really big area across the United States.
About a third of the U.S., yeah.
So potentially any of that water could potentially end up with these fish.
Certainly can. I've got colleagues that work with them in the Arkansas River, the White River in Arkansas. As I said, I see them jumping when I fish below Pickwick Dam all the time. They're in Pickwick Reservoir now. They're moving, and there's a lot of money being spent to try to slow down that movement. There's actually, Mississippi State has a number of projects that are trying to keep an eye on the Tenn-Tom waterway because we're concerned they're going to come from Pickwick Lake down. I don't think that's going to be a big problem because there's not really any flow in the Tenn-Tom until you get down to Tombigbee River. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that they're going to get real abundant there, but anywhere there's a big flowing river that has enough distance for them to reproduce, that they're gonna do well.
Does the lock and dam system in the waterway help control them at all?
Yeah, that's a barrier. It prevents. I mean, they can get through certainly, but they're just simply not attracted to the waterway, in my opinion, because they're attracted to flow, and there's really no flow coming from the waterway into Pickwick, and there's really no flow coming from Pickwick down the waterway.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask. That is good news to me.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. They can even, I mentioned they go down all the way to the base of the Mississippi River. They can even go out into the Gulf of Mexico whenever we get a big flood.
Oh yeah,
because
fresh water.
Yeah. They have shown up in the Pearl River in Mississippi.
Oh yeah.
And I believe there's even one caught off of a fishing pier out of Orange Beach once. So in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
So when the water salinities are lower, they can tolerate some salinity.
What'd they catch it on?
I don't know.
They probably snagged it.
Yeah,
if I
it
had to
could have been
guess.
snagged. I don't think they caught it fishing, but there was one captured in one way or another from there, I believe.
Yeah.
Man, and I saw where it's been a couple years, but LSU was doing some work on canning it, and experimenting with different ways you can eat it. And I don't know. When I look at one, I don't really want to eat it, but.
Well, they're delicious fish. The flesh is very good. The problem is they've got intermuscular bones. So they're, you've heard people talking about eating pike or muskie or northern pike. Because of the bones are the problem. Well, the carp are the same. They've got these intermuscular bones that are in the meat. So if you don't mind picking through the meat, you can flay them like a normal fish and cook them like a normal fish, and they're very good.
Okay.
But if you have a diversion to the bones, which some people do, some people like their meat to be boneless, it becomes more of a challenge. And there's lots of videos online about how to debone them, how to take them off. You can take the strips and use them as strips. One of the things that Flying Fish Dish I've heard is there's actually a website, I think it's called flyingfishdish.com or something like that, where it's recipes for them. But like you make buffalo wings out of them, where you take strips of the meat, fry them up in a batter, cover them in buffalo sauce. Supposed to be really good.
Okay.
I've had them in tacos. I've had them in a few other different types of dishes.
Well, I guess I need to try it.
Yeah.
Wow.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Moultrie was first in feeders since 1979 and is the leader in total game management. They're taking feeding to another level with the new Ranch Series line of durable and versatile feeders, perfect for both wildlife and domestic livestock. So Dudley, you can feed your goats. Whether you're a deer hunter, a hobby farmer, a land manager, or a rancher, Moultrie has you covered with several kit options, including a rotating auger, broadcast, or a gravity kit. And these feeders are 300 or 450 pounds. They're big feeders. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount. Yeah.
Cuckoo and flying fish recipe. What's that?
And then
Maybe that's it.
we do have some native species that are similar, just in the way they look. Like, don't we have the buffalo and what? I'm trying to think of some more. But there's some carp-like species around
Yeah,
here.
there's river carp suckers, buffalo, quillbacks, a lot of different species that look kind of similar to them. The one thing that we do mistake them for, which is a problem, though, is that young silver carp look an awful lot like shad.
Okay.
And when where do people like to catch their bait shad? They go below the dam. They throw the cast net, they catch a bucket full of shad, and they go above the dam to fish. Well, that's a great way that these fish get moved from below the dam to above the dam, and that's one of the ways that they're spreading. So that's a big concern as well, because they do look a lot like a shad if you're not paying close attention. I mean, if you're paying close attention, you can tell them apart. But a lot of folks don't. You throw a cast net, you catch a bunch of silvery fish, you throw them in a bait bucket, and you don't worry about it. So folks that are doing that, they need to be vigilant. Pay attention to what they're doing. Try not to move fish from below one dam to above the dam, because
This sounds a lot like these wild pigs we're dealing with, in that you can probably go out there and get your bow fishing rig and shoot as many of them as you want and eat some and make fertilizer out of the others, but you're not going to solve the problem. I mean,
no, and we're working on some things. When I say we, scientists are working on some new things, some genetic approaches to take care of them. And I think eventually we'll get something figured out. But we've got to encourage commercial fishing for them. They're getting better and better at fishing for them. Just to put it in perspective, the guest I had on, they did a controlled removal of them from a 300 I think it was a 300-acre reservoir, 300-hectare reservoir. I forget what he said, but it wasn't a very big system. They in one event, so over a course of several days, they removed 240,000 pounds of carp from a 300-acre lake.
Wow.
I mean,
say
there's
that
a
again.
lot. 240,000 pounds.
Wow.
That worked out to something like 600 or 700 pounds per acre, or per, I forget. It was enormous, more than the typical biomass of fish in a lake.
Right.
So it's when they get abundant, they get ridiculously abundant because they're at the bottom of the food chain. Like a largemouth bass, first you got to have phytoplankton, then you got to have zooplankton, then you got to have insects and small fish, and then the largemouth bass are at the top, and only about 10% of that energy transfers from level to level. Well, these guys bypass the small fish, they bypass the insects, they're eating at the zooplankton level, so they get a lot more of that energy turned into fish mass.
Yeah, and it seems, similar to the way a lot of invasives, work their way into our ecosystem is, we've had all these plants and animals doing their thing for so long, and then you throw something in there that's, able to find a niche that we don't, have with our normal species, and they just take off. So kind of scary.
Yeah.
So there's one more carp we need to be aware of?
Yeah, there's one more, and that's the black carp. And this one's just come on the scene relatively recently. Black carp were being stocked for a while into aquaculture ponds to control snails. And it was a good product for them because they didn't have to feed it. It automatically got food from the pond on its own, and it was another product that they could sell. But they did get out. They've gotten into our waters. They're not super abundant yet, but if they become abundant, first of all, it's the biggest of the species. So it can get even bigger. We're talking 100-plus pound fish out there in the environment. The problem with the black carp is the black carp are molluscivores, which means they eat snails and mollusks, or snails and like mussels.
Oh, man.
One thing to know about the southeastern United States is we have the richest diversity of mussels in the world. And many of them are already threatened and endangered. And now we just introduced into that system the world's greatest predator of mussel eaters. So the jury's going to be out on what the effect's going to be, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a very good effect. So.
Goodness gracious, I'd never even heard of a black carp.
Yeah. And you mentioned species that look alike. There's one species out there that looks a lot like it, a blue sucker. And, there is a bounty on the black carp right now. Certain areas, and can't say right offhand where those areas are. They're collecting data on them. If you collect the black carp, I think it's a $100 reward on them because they want data on it. But they want you to take a picture of it and email the picture to a biologist to confirm it, because the blue sucker, they're not endangered, but they're relatively rare, and they're an important native species. And they look a lot alike, and someone could easily mistake a black carp for a blue sucker and kill the blue sucker when they don't need to.
So, where the black carp, are they in the Mississippi River Basin?
They are. They're all in the Mississippi River.
Wow.
They got a big mouth on them. I'm looking at one now.
They're kind of a pretty fish.
Yeah, they
I
really
think
are. They're a lot better looking than that other one.
I think so.
Well, so there's 4 carp we need to be aware of. There's that silver carp and the bighead, and the bighead is the one everybody's is bow fishing for, I guess, right?
Well, the bighead and the silver carp, they call them the big-headed carp.
Okay.
And so they're all the same genus. I think it's Hypothalmictes, I think it's the genus for those.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it was.
And so those are very similar in terms of their biology and where they're found. And yeah, folks are catching a lot of those.
Yeah.
The people are also fishing the common carp, and they're fishing bow fishing the grass carp. The grass carps tend to be up in the shallow areas. They're typically in the weeds. It's a great place to bow fish, right? You can see them. And then the black carp, they're more rare right now. I don't think there's a lot of people harvesting those, or at least intentionally harvesting those. But there's those 4 species are the ones that are the most concerned. The common carp, we've all gotten used to it. I think we all kind of think of it as a native species. It's not, but it's really naturalized. It's been here so long, we kind of think of it as it's one that's always been here. There's got a lot of species like that people don't realize. Brown trout aren't from the United States. Even honeybees aren't from the United States. So.
There's a
Pheasants.
Pheasants are considered an important species here, but no, they're not from here.
So in the United States, there's carp all over, but people really don't have any respect for them or fish for them or treat them like a sport fish. But when I went to England, I was absolutely shocked with the reverence and respect and all the equipment that was designed just to go and fish for carp over there. And these guys would catch a carp and handle it like it was their firstborn child. It was, I was so shocked. How is that never, what are we missing?
I don't know. I mean, they were brought here for that reason. You know, the Europeans that immigrated here brought the carp because they revered them so much. Why it never took off, I'm not sure. I have within the last decade or so, started to see carp tournaments and, you know, some of the big European tour tournaments showing up here in the United States because we've got pretty good carp fisheries. Mm-hmm. So maybe it'll catch on. I don't know. I mean, personally, I've never really been one that's wanted to go out and fish for largemouth bass. I'd much rather catch a smallmouth bass or a striped bass or a white bass. But, you know, I don't know why some things take off more than others.
Yeah, Bobby doesn't like largemouth either.
Yeah. He likes to eat them. That's it.
Okay, let's not get. We're going crazy here.
Digressing quickly.
Right. I'm comprehending what he just said there. I'm understanding what you said because not everybody cares about the same things. But when you walked in, I was so focused on carp, and then I just kind of casually asked you about the snakeheads. Are they as big a problem? Is the carp? Are they going to be as big a problem? And tell us what you were saying in Virginia. What was going on?
It doesn't seem like they're going to be as bad as we thought they were going to be. The snakeheads, you know, they showed up a couple decades ago in Virginia, the Potomac River area, and boy, when it got out that they were there, the world went crazy. I mean, there were 2 or 3 sci-fi channel movies. One was called Snakehead Terror. The other one was Snakehead Swamp. And you know, people were calling the state
old B movie.
People were calling the state agencies and saying, "Are you know, is it safe for my children to go near the water? Can my dog swim?" I mean, they were really worried. And Virginia spent a lot of money to try to figure this out and to control them. And over the years, what we figured out is that we haven't seen the negative effects that we expected to see. In fact, some of the sport fish species we were most worried about have not changed at all. And in some cases, we've seen more of certain species than others. So far, there's no negative effects. Sure, they could get into an environment where there's an endangered species that's susceptible and they could become a problem, but they haven't appeared to be as big of a disaster as they thought they'd be. Then, you know, of course, as I said, people were scared to death of them at first. And now the anglers have figured it out. The bow fishermen figured it out first. The bow fishermen started going out and night fishing for these things. They find them in shallow water. They live in places where bowfin would live because they like shallow, weedy spots, swampy spots. The bow fishermen can get them pretty easily, and they have started selling them in fish markets. And apparently they're pulling in prices that are equivalent to like snapper and grouper. So they're making a lot of money. In a typical night, you go out and shoot 30 snakeheads, you could probably make $500 or $600 selling them at the fish market. The anglers also figured out, hey, these things are delicious and they're a lot of fun to catch and they're pretty easy to catch. So they started targeting them. So when they first showed up, everybody was scared to death. Now when the commission has their public meetings, snakeheads are the number one topic, but they're not saying, you know, what are you doing to get rid of snakeheads? They're saying, what are you doing to protect the snakeheads? You know, how are you going to get these bow fishermen to stop shooting them all so that we have snakeheads? And you mentioned the feral pigs earlier. You know, Mississippi State has a video called Truckload of Pigs, people driving them around. Well, snakeheads are being moved around like pigs are being moved around, except with snakeheads, you can put them in your trunk, and they don't even need water. They just, as long as they stay moist for a couple hours, they're fine. And they're showing up in places above dams that they could never cross, stream systems that are hundreds of miles from their last known location. People are moving them around like they move the pigs around and causing problems. Now, so far, we haven't seen any major effects. But again, it's a non-native species going into a new system, and they're going to compete in some way with what's there.
It's not worth finding out.
No.
Yeah.
It is a kind of a weird looking
Oh,
fish.
yeah. It looks like a predator for sure.
Yeah, like a knife blade or something.
Are there any of those in the Tom Bigby River system?
No, we do have snakeheads in Mississippi now.
Yeah.
They have, the first location where they escaped from was Virginia. Then they showed up in Arkansas, and
Somebody took a truck ride.
yeah, well, no, that one there was actually an aquaculture farmer brought some in legally and was thinking about growing them, and then when the agency found out the danger, they had them destroy them. The Arkansas farmer did destroy them, but it turned out they had probably already escaped because they can cross land when conditions are right. Like after a rainstorm, they can cross a levee. They can walk, not walk, but they can swim across land basically.
Yeah.
So they got out. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission spent at least $1 million poisoning out the river that they got into and restocking it, but they didn't get them. And they've now spread to Missouri, Tennessee, Louisiana, and they've shown up here. I think the agency's only had maybe half a dozen to a dozen reports of them so far, all down on the Mississippi tributary area. So
Interesting. I got a quick question going back to the carp. What's the difference between a drum and a carp? Or is there?
a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, a freshwater drum is related to the black drum, the red drum from the ocean.
Okay.
It's the only freshwater drum species that we have in the United States. What people call them sheep's head, Gasper goose.
Gasper goose.
Yeah,
goose.
all these different things. They're a very different species. I enjoyed catching them too. They're
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
that's why I was wondering because I love catching red drum and sheephead
Yeah.
and eating them. So kind of looks the same.
It does. I've eaten freshwater drum. I'm not a huge fan of the flavor,
yeah.
But I will go back talking about flavor. Snakeheads. The reason why snakeheads got here and the reason why they move around or get moved around a lot is they're wonderful to eat. Absolutely wonderful to eat. And I was talking earlier. I said to me they're more like a chicken than they are like a fish. They don't taste like fish. They're a dense white meat that's more like chicken breast, and it'll take any flavor that you marinate it in. Doesn't taste fishy at all. Really, really good to eat fish.
That fish needs a publicist because it's got the worst name ever.
Yep. Well, you know that the silver carp and the big-headed carp just got a new name for that purpose. You may start hearing about Copi, C-O-P-I, I think it's called. Google it, make sure I got that right. But I think it's C-O-P-I is what they're going to start calling the invasive carps as a way to market it better and start selling Copi.
Choose Copi. There it is.
Yep. In all the restaurants, when you start seeing, braised Copi with a bed of asparagus, you're talking about silver carp. Because that's what they did. They've done that with a lot of species. What was it?
I was trying
Chilean
to
sea
think.
bass.
That's it, the Chilean sea bass.
What was that before?
It was like the snaggletooth something.
Toothfish or something, yeah.
In rape, the plant is canola.
Right.
They changed it from rape to canola.
I don't know how it ever got the name rape to begin with.
I don't
I
know.
don't either.
Rapa. It's in its scientific name,
Yeah, that's
Bobby.
probably what it is.
Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah. So, thinking about invasive fish, as a kid, I grew up walking these little ditches and creeks, and there were all these little minnows in there, and I think now they were called mosquito fish. Is that a fish that has been stocked?
They've been moved around a lot. Yeah, mosquito fish are a gambusia, which is the same family as guppies. But mosquito fish are native. We have a western mosquito fish and an eastern mosquito fish in the United States. But they were stocked all over the place because people thought they controlled mosquitoes. They don't really. I mean, they could. If a mosquito's there, they'll eat it. But mosquitoes generally are not coming from your pond or your lake. They're coming from the tree hole or the bucket you got out back or, places where there aren't predators for mosquitoes. But yes, those are very common. And we're talking about invasive species, and this is going to get you, and you're not going to like this very much. You know what? One of the world's most invasive species of fish is
Bass.
largemouth bass.
Yeah.
I told
It's
you.
been introduced everywhere.
You know what? I've heard that.
Everywhere.
I heard Japan is
Yes.
like making an all-out effort to get rid of them.
Well, Japan they fairly recently tied the world record with a quite a large fish. I've got records from Cuba. I worked with them for 27 years in Puerto Rico. I've got records from Africa. Wow. So if they can live there, they have introduced them.
And
And I'm gonna tell you what. Around here, your pond's not right. It's overpopulated with largemouth bass.
Well, Cuba, you're going back to Cuba. I remember growing up being really young and hearing some men talk about taking a vacation and going to Cuba just to bass fish. So they thought that there might be some really huge bass down there.
Yeah, there were reports of like 30-pounders coming out of there. But
Good grief.
when I worked on my dissertation, I tried to find the records of every record from every location because I wanted to see how latitude affected size of bass. And I never found anything that big. The Cuban record I think I found was, I want to say it was like 18 pounds. Still pretty good fish.
A giant fish. Yeah.
Those are some big fillets.
Yeah, those are, man, you make some nuggets out of those.
So as a biologist, and I would assume in Mississippi probably more people care about largemouth bass than most, ask you more questions about largemouth.
Yeah.
But what's the biggest one you've seen come out of a pond?
Before Oktibbeha County Lake went dry, I electrofished one there that maxed out a scale. It was a 6,000 gram scale, which is about 13 pounds, and it maxed out the scale. So it was bigger than 13 pounds.
That's a big fish.
That's a giant fish. Yeah.
I've never seen anything huge from ponds because I guess ponds just don't have the habitat diversity to grow something that large. Of course, Natchez
State Park.
Natchez State Park isn't that large of a lake, and that's where the state record came from. It was over 18. So
Big fish.
Big
Wow.
fish.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do.
You just lay down there and
I
we'd have to
thought-
bury you.
I-
I'm sure
thought
you would
about
get
what I
it
would do.
taxidermed.
I think I would try to take some pictures, but I think I would release it.
You wouldn't eat it?
No, I would not eat it. But I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't mount it either. You know, I would think I would want to put it back.
yeah.
And get a reproduction done.
Something, but I couldn't imagine killing that fish. If you caught
Did you
one.
kill that fish behind you?
I did. That was in my younger, dumber days. That I sure did. My dad had just passed away.
Is that a 5
And
pound bass?
and I had one of his rod and reels with a lure he had tied on, and I caught that fish.
That is very deserving.
Yeah, it really
I'm
was.
not against killing fish. You know this.
Yeah, well, I don't like killing large bass. I turn them loose. But anyway, thank you for pointing that one out.
Yes.
I kind of got you back on that one, didn't I?
Yeah, you
A little
did.
bit.
The Ferminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting. From start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor and the Ferminator does the rest. Check it out at theferminator.com.
What else do we need to be asking about these invasives? There's certainly something we're missing here.
Well, the big thing is the public needs to know, be careful about moving these fish around because, as I said, you can be as honest a mistake as it can be. You can throw a cast net below one dam to catch shad to go catfish above the dam and then release what you have in the bucket and cause a catastrophe above there. So you got to be very careful about moving any fish around, not just bait fish or silver carp or whatever. Always pay attention to what you're moving and try not to move fish from one basin to another or from below the dam to above the dam just because, it's not likely a problem happens, but if it does, it's a big problem. So that's the biggest thing is that. And the other thing is if you're in a river system where you've got a lot of these jumping carp, the silver carp, and you're spending a lot of time out there, you might want to consider putting some kind of protective barrier around your throttle of your boat. You create some kind of cage where your hand can go through, but if a carp slams up against it, it's not going to break off your throttle mechanism. It's not going to throw you into full throttle or throw you into reverse all of a sudden. Something to protect that. Just be careful. I've heard that, if you're going faster, like if you're going 30 plus miles per hour, that the carp are usually jumping behind you. So, some people run really fast, but if you're following another boat, remember that, you're going 40 miles an hour, but you're behind another boat, then the chances of a fish jumping behind that boat and coming through your windshield are pretty high. So just be careful when you're in these systems. Try to avoid those things. Don't move fish around is the biggest one. Be careful. And think about eating these fish. They're good to eat. Learn how to cook them. Learn how to clean them.
Yeah, we definitely need to try that.
Yeah,
Ingredient wild.
no doubt about it. I've already looking at how to clean one right here.
So when you, as a fisheries expert, if you're somewhere and y'all caught a big grinnell, and they said, why don't we cook this thing up tonight? You don't have any hesitancy. You would try. You've probably got a recipe. You've got a.
I've eaten grinnell,
Yeah.
bowfin.
My hesitancy would depend on where I'm at. You know, if it's a big bowfin that's 18-pound bowfin or something, I probably wouldn't eat that, especially if the system has got any kind of mercury warnings on it, because the bigger fish, they tend, especially a predator and bowfin, they eat a lot of other fish. They're going to bioaccumulate toxins in their body. So I like to eat the smaller fish, the faster growing fish, typically crappie, white bass, things like that don't live real long. I wouldn't want to, like if I caught a 40-pound striper, I'm probably like you, I'd probably take a picture of it and release it, because who knows what's been building up in that fish's body over the last 10 years.
So is mercury something you're kind of paying attention to?
A little bit. I mean, much more when I had young children, but now I don't worry about lead, mercury nearly as much, because, I'm grown as much as I'm going to grow, hopefully. But
it's a thing.
Yeah,
it's
it is a
deal.
thing. I mean, the Tennessee River, which is where I fish a lot, there's a lot of different consumption warnings on the Tennessee River for species like largemouth bass, species that would, build up big catfish. Like, for example, I won't keep a catfish anymore over 10 pounds for sure, just because, well, one is I don't like them as much, but two, they're going to build up a lot more contaminants because they're a long-lived fish.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Is it just because of environmental stuff? I mean, people not disposing of stuff properly?
It's because of industry. A lot of times, a lot of industry that was out there, battery factories, things like that, that were releasing chemicals into the environment. Some of it's environmental, some of it's coming from atmospheric deposition, but a lot of it's
industrial
just a lot
waste.
of industrial, activity along the corridor which these rivers flow through. I mean, it's development. We as a society, we have to build stuff.
Yeah.
And, we didn't know how to keep things clean for a long time. So for a long time, we were polluting our waterways. And heck, a lot of people don't even realize that before the 1970s and a lot of the Clean Water Act and things like that, we actually had our rivers were catching on fire.
No, man.
I mean, the Cuyahoga River, I think it's in Ohio, I think.
Yes.
The Cuyahoga River, I think it caught on fire more than a dozen times. And the last time, it was the most famous time. I mean, just imagine the river's burning.
Wow.
Because it's so polluted.
I read about that.
Yep. So,
Man, I hope ours don't ever get that way.
well, the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act have really cleaned up our systems a whole lot.
Yeah, I know I keep going back to the Tombigbee, but as far as cleanliness, would you keep a 10-pound catfish that came out of the Tombigbee?
I have.
Would you if you caught one tomorrow?
I'm moving away from catfish over 5 or 6 pounds just because I like the texture of the fillet better when they're smaller.
Not because of mercury content.
Not because of mercury.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm good to go there.
Yeah.
Just wondering.
You can tell where his mind is.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's on catfish, and it's on the Tombigbee River.
Yeah.
It's it's interesting how different waterways or end up being more slanted toward one fishery or another, and then they kind of get a reputation, and people travel and come and enjoy that. But gosh, when you think about Mississippi, we've got some great crappie reservoirs.
Yeah.
And catfishing obviously is very
Great.
popular. Yeah, and
Fishing all the way around.
yeah, and there's some of these. I don't know what they're called, but you mentioned the Natchez Park, and there's this one called Calling Panther, I think.
Yeah.
And I hear that it is on fire for big bass.
It used to be really good. In fact, a friend of mine that works for Georgia DNR came over and fished here. I don't know, it's probably been 8 or 10 years ago, and he was telling about a day he and his buddy had where they put in the boat. I think it was 8 fish over 10 pounds from Calling Panther.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, in one day.
That was my favorite spot, and y'all just ruined it.
Maybe they put them back.
Yeah, I bet they did.
I'm sure they did.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, Davis, Jeff Davis Lake down south of Mississippi.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, we were doing research on it, and it was, I mean, every bass I caught electrofishing was 6 to 12 pounds in that lake. I don't know if it's still that way or not. That's probably been 5 years, but we've got some really good fisheries around here that are relatively unknown.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
We've got walleye in Mississippi.
we sure do. I've got a research project looking at the walleye right now, and we don't have very many of them, and the ones that we have are more the ones we've stocked to try to keep them around. But there are some, hopefully, still some wild ones, and they're all in the 10 Tom. That's where they're all at. That's where they're still here.
Interesting.
Luxapalaya Creek and places like that.
I think they caught a giant bass up there at Davis Lake, just north of here.
Yeah, I think the second biggest in the state was a 17-something from Davis.
Yeah, that's the beginning of the Sikatachi drainage. Sure
Wow.
is. Right here in your backyard.
Yeah. I've caught a couple walleye. I'm not real impressed. It's kind of like hooking a wet towel.
When I was young in Tennessee, my uncle would fish for, he called them sauger, Sauger. Is that a walleye?
It's a cousin to the walleye. It's in the
Okay.
same genus. Tennessee's famous for them. It's probably one of the best fisheries is below Pickwick Reservoir that flows into Kentucky Lake. There's
Yeah.
really big fishery. A lot of the tournaments would be held there. I've caught them quite a few times there. They don't get very big. I mean, a big one's 18, 19 inches long. I think they got to be maybe 15 inches to keep. So you get two little narrow fillets, but they're delicious.
Delicious, yeah.
Very, very good.
Sometimes when we're draining these duck ponds in July and August, and you go back the next day, there'll be like little small chain pickerels. You'll see them coming out of these areas that have been flooded all winter long, and then they look like a little mini pike.
Yeah, they could be chain pickerel. They could be grass pickerel. Grass pickerel are real common in those weedy areas like that.
Maybe that's what it is.
And
They're very similar looking.
And it's something like a little freshwater shrimp looking thing in some of that stuff too.
Probably grass shrimp.
Is that what it is? Grass
Probably.
shrimp.
There's a lot of cool stuff in
there's
under
all
the
kind of
water
stuff in
besides
there.
brim and bass and catfish.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I get calls every now and then. Somebody will call me and they'll say that they've caught an eel, and they might have. American eel's not unheard of in some of our waterways, but a lot of times they'll send me the picture, and we have several amphibians that
Like
look
a hellbender.
well. They're like a hellbender. We got one, the lesser siren, which is maybe a foot and a half long. And then we've got something called an amphiuma, which is really big. I mean, it gets really large and looks like an eel, but it's actually an amphibian. It's like a lizard, like a salamander.
I think I caught one of those.
Yeah, and people will catch them on hook and line. Yeah.
Yeah, sure did.
Wow.
I thought it
Cool
was an eel.
This is a fun discussion.
Yeah,
we're not
it
really
is.
talking about hunting or whatever. This is different. I like it.
Why don't we, Jason? Why don't we ask him a trivia question?
Ooh.
Did you know you were getting a trivia question?
I'm terrible at trivia, so let's see.
Well, this one, I don't know. We might stretch it.
We like trying to stump the university podcasters like Marcus and Bronson.
Yeah. We hadn't done it yet, but we tried.
All right, Jason's going to play. We have a trivia sponsor.
Our good buddies at Sheffield.
Yeah.
Today's trivia is brought to you by Sheffield Financial. Explore swift, effortless, and convenient financing for power sports, outdoor power equipment, and trailers, fueling your pursuits in hunting, fishing, and game keeping. More details at sheffieldfinancial.com.
Boy, that Richie's got a face for radio,
Yeah,
doesn't he?
he
I'm
does.
telling you.
Well, and look, I get nervous here. Richie's not at the board. Jason's at the board. I think Jason spent more time in the weight room than he did.
Jason's the OG producer, man.
Well, yeah, I know, but when it comes to reading these questions, he spent more time in the weight room than he did learning to read. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this will go.
He might slap you around. You better watch your mouth.
Yeah.
All right, we're playing for Lick Creek Farmer.
Lick Creek Farmer.
They left us a really good review. I'm going to read the review. Best podcast for the Gamekeeper. I really enjoyed the podcast. It is highlight of my week. It helped me to take managing my farm to the next level. Well worth the listen each week. Keep up the good work.
Wow.
Right.
Look,
Lick
that was
Creek.
nice. Do
That
you know that
was
guy?
nice.
He's
I mean,
one of
I
your
don't-
cousins
no,
or
it's-
brothers. Isn't
It's
it?
the highlight of my week too.
Yeah.
All right, Nick Creek, just get back in touch with us. He won a prize. What did he win?
The prize is a B&M crappie pole.
Ooh,
That's right.
nice.
They're right here in West Point.
No doubt. B&M originally stand for?
Broom and mop.
That's
I
right.
think. Yeah. So they've got some great stuff. You can go to bnmpoles.com. I
Yeah.
think. Lenny, you might want to check that for me. But
B&M.
Google B&M and you can probably find it. They got some great products.
They're making
And,
some great catfish rods, too. So,
They do.
Yeah, they do.
They've
Sure
been in
do.
business a long time.
They are. Great West Point company and brand.
I think if there's anything on there you want, you can type in Gamekeeper and get a 15% discount.
Off the B&M? Well, let me get on that.
All right, so let's ask him a question.
Within 10 pounds, what is the weight of the world record grass caught on a rod and reel?
Grass carp. That word's carp.
Well, it just says grass. It don't say carp. I'm reading the paper here.
Got him. Good job,
Who
Bobby.
wrote that? Bobby? Yeah, that's right.
Within 10 pounds, I would.
But now, look, I'm going to give you 10 pounds because this is not domestic.
Yeah. I'm going to guess.
This is a world thing?
record.
Oh, man.
I'm going to guess it's going to be somewhere in the just shy of 3 digits. I'm going to go with 87 pounds.
Oh my goodness, you just about nailed it.
He nailed it.
World record for grass carp caught in a line and hook is 87.6 pounds.
What do you mean he almost nailed it? He nailed it.
I actually couldn't remember. I knew it was in the 80s.
We may have to give him 2 T-shirts.
Yeah, he gets a
instead
couple of
one.
T-shirts.
And where was it caught?
Caught in Bulgaria in 2009.
Who knew they were fishing in Bulgaria?
Bulgaria.
That's a big fish.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's a big one. He nailed it, too.
I bet they ate it. What do you want to bet?
I don't know.
Most people eat their world record unless they're. No, never mind.
I have no idea.
Would you eat a
about
marlin?
You know, a lot of people do.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
And
I was
those-
just asking if you would.
Those tournaments, when they die, reeling them in,
Yeah, they make a.
they donate them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've eaten marlin before. I don't know that I'd want to keep the one I caught, but I've eaten other people's marlin.
Right.
It's quite
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I've eaten it too. That's why I was asking.
Have you caught
Don't
one?
hate on me.
What is it like, tuna or?
I had marlin ceviche, and it was good.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's
No, it's
definitely
white.
definitely not like tuna.
No,
yeah.
no, it's white
Maybe
fish.
more like a mahi,
Wahoo
Yeah.
or-
wahoo, that kind.
Yeah, wahoo-ish.
exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've enjoyed it.
Oh, 100%. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I enjoyed being here.
Yeah, thanks
It's
for what you're
interesting
doing,
to
too.
kind of expand the discussion beyond just some of the normal things and learn. There's challenges going on all around us.
Yeah, fisheries, man. It's
And gamekeepers like to eat a lot, so
and
you know,
gamekeepers
it's good food
like to
source.
fish. I mean,
And managing a pond, to me, it's just there's so many things you can do and you see the results, but you actually can't unless you electrofish or something. You really can't see definitively what's going on down there. When you explain things to landowners and everything, they've got to just believe what you're telling them.
Yeah, and a lot of times they don't. That's funny. It's everyone has their own opinion. Yeah, I tell people a lot of times that managing a pond is as much of an art as it is a science.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we've kind of worked out details. If you do this, you'll get success, but you also have to pay attention. So, like for example, harvesting fish. We were talking about keeping bass earlier. That's the biggest problem I see. Besides plants, what weed is this and how do I kill it? I get a lot, but the second biggest problem I see is why are my bass so small and skinny?
yeah, too many of them.
Because you won't take them out. Yeah. Somebody spent a lot of money to build a pond. They spent a lot of money to stock a pond, and now they don't want to kill those fish because they're their pets. But you got to take them out.
I want a trophy bluegill lake
Hey,
and just have a
Hey,
bunch of overpopulated bass in it.
we're gonna work on that.
You probably paid attention to this young lady in North Alabama, Sarah
I've been to her
Barber.
place.
Yeah,
Yep.
we've enjoyed talking to her. She's very impressive. Hey, I wanted to ask you just to educate people. If you've got a pond and you're catching some bass, doing like what you need to do, you don't want that person to take those bass and turn them loose somewhere else, especially not in a public fishery.
Ideally, no. Couple of reasons. One is you might move genetics or diseases around, which you don't want to do that. The second thing is a lot of folks think they go out and electrofish a pond, catch a 12-pound bass, and bring it back to their personal lake and stock it. Well, that bass got 12 pounds because it knew that environment and it excelled in that environment. And usually when you do that, that bass loses weight and it dies a lot of times. Or the next time you see it electrofishing, it's 7 pounds.
Yeah.
Because it got 12 pounds making a living in one place, and then you transplanted it and it didn't know how to make a living in the next place.
How about that?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I appreciate you coming over here. Laney, you got anything to ask?
Nah, I mean, learned a lot today.
Yeah. Dudley?
That was good.
It was
Good
good.
I
stuff.
think we got to start eating some carp.
I need to check out Fish University.
Check it out.
I'm going to do that.
It's a fledgling little podcast.
So
Oh, cool.
there's fish, there's deer, there's fire,
Habitat.
habitat.
We got a brand new one that Mark McConnell
Mark.
and James Calicut are starting. It's going to be upland, or going to be game bird.
That's right.
So, but yeah, it's the Fish University. I cover everything from a lot of pond management because that's what a lot of people want to hear about.
Yeah.
But I cover. And I said I had a whole show on the Asian carps or the invasive carps, the snakeheads. We had a show on that. I had a show with Sarah Parvin with the Slab Lab over in Alabama.
Oh, nice.
So so cover topics. Had one on managing red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico. Had one with an aquatic vet out of California who works on people's goldfish. So, a lot of different topics that are fish related, not just necessarily fish management.
Nice.
Bobby, you may need to get the goldfish person.
I have a gold. So when I first moved down to this, when I was down to, I had a goldfish that was about 15 years old here.
Yeah, we still got him in the freezer, don't we?
Well, yes, we do. So one night I come in the office and he's not in the tank.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
He started in a little cup. My daughter won him at a fair with throwing ping pong balls, and I kept putting him in a bigger jar, and finally an aquarium. It lasted a long time, and then one night he's not there, and I assumed a raccoon had broke in the building and got him.
It happens really often here. It does.
It's more often than you would. But then later we found him on the floor, so we don't know what happened.
He committed suicide.
Evidently.
Gotcha.
So I've got one that's 10 years old now. And it's just amazing how fast they will grow from a 25-cent goldfish to a. You'll have to go see Goldberg before you leave here.
Goldberg Part 2.
Yeah, Goldberg.
Pretty
part two.
impressive.
The second.
And they live a long time if you can keep them happy.
I'm told they can live like 30 years.
Yeah.
Bobby's always talking to him in there.
He's a
you
good
can
fish.
hear.
Goldberg. He was a good one. We played taps for him, didn't we? I think we did. On the
Well,
podcast.
no, I don't remember what we did, but he's in the freezer somewhere. Okay, look, we're just
We'll do
Maybe
this
we
all-
can get
we'll do this all day.
Tom to get it mounted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I might have thrown him out last year. honestly.
I remember Patricia going, "What is this?"
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Wes Neal, we appreciate you being here. Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Cleve.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.